The celebration on Nexus Prime was loud and bright. Alien species from 12 different worlds filled the Grand Council chamber, their different bodies and shapes making the room look like a living museum of the galaxy. Some had multiple arms. Some had skin that glowed with inner light. Some were tall as buildings, and others small enough to fit in a human palm. But all of them shared one feeling today. They had won. Supreme Commander Hal stood at the center of the chamber. His crystalline body caught the light from the massive windows overlooking the planet below. 4 of his arms held weapons of communication. The other 2 rested at his sides. He looked out at the council members and began to speak. "The human resistance is broken," Hal said, his voice harsh but clear. "Our models show their remaining military force cannot survive another year of conflict. They have lost control of their colonies. Earth itself is blockaded. Food is running short. Water must be rationed. Their morale continues to fall each passing day." The council members made sounds of agreement. A representative raised one of her 6 eyes toward the screen showing battlefield maps. She saw only blue lines representing the collective's forces and red lines representing human ships. The blue lines outnumbered red by a massive number. "What about their hidden bases?" asked Commander, a being made entirely of living metal. His voice sounded like grinding gears. "Humans have shown a talent for hiding in deep space." Hal moved one of his 4 arms to display a hologram. "We have scanned 17 asteroid fields in the region where humans were last seen operating. Our deep space sensors cover 98% of the visible. Hidden bases cannot launch major offensive operations. They can only survive, and survival is not victory." The chamber fell silent. Every military commander there understood what Hal was saying. Humans could hide. Humans could wait. But humans could not win, not against the combined forces of 12 galactic species, not against technology that had been developed for thousands of years, not against mathematical certainty. Admiral N, who led the fleet personally, stepped forward. "I recommend we begin occupation preparations for the human worlds. Within 6 months, we can have government forces established on Earth and all human colonies. The species will be absorbed into the collective. Their soldiers will be integrated or removed as needed." The vote was quick, unanimous. Even the species who had joined the collective only recently understood that this war was finished. Humans had fought hard, but they were finally completely defeated. On the other side of the galaxy, Captain Aaron Cross sat alone in the command center of the Asgard. The ship had once been a pride of the human fleet. Now it was damaged, repaired many times, and running on systems that were barely holding together. Most of the command center was dark. Only the main screens and communication equipment still worked. Aaron was a man of 47 years. His dark hair had turned gray from the war. His face was thin and weathered. His eyes held the kind of tiredness that comes from making impossible decisions for 3 long years. He had watched thousands of his soldiers die. He had ordered the destruction of entire fleets. He had sent families to their deaths. And he was not done yet. The Asgard floated in a hidden base carved deep into an asteroid. Around him, 300 crew members managed the ship. Most of them were young. Most of them had never known a time when humanity was winning. They had been born into a war they did not start and did not understand. But they fought anyway. They died anyway. They believed anyway. A message came through the encrypted communication system. It was from Commander Victoria Martinez, leader of the Horizon, a research vessel that had become a warship. Her message was short. "Gathering points activated. Fleet is assembling." Aaron closed his eyes. He had sent out the call 3 weeks ago, a desperate message to every human ship still functional in the galaxy. Most would never receive it. Some would ignore it. Some would not have the fuel to make the journey. But some would come, not many, not enough by any military measure. But perhaps enough to matter. He activated the communication system himself. His voice was steady, but it carried the weight of a man making his final stand. "This is Captain Aaron Cross of the Asgard. I am sending coordinates to all receiving stations. I am calling for every human military vessel still capable of reaching the battle zone to gather at these coordinates. This is not a suggestion. This is not an option. This is our last chance to fight as one united force." He paused. He thought about Earth. He thought about the families waiting in bunkers underground. He thought about the children who would grow up in a galaxy ruled by beings who had already decided humanity was finished. "We have one choice," Aaron continued. "Surrender and accept a future decided by others, or fight, one last time together, all of us. We are the only ones who can save ourselves. No one else is coming. No miracle is waiting in the sky. It is only us. The message was sent across every human communication channel. It would reach the damaged cruisers hiding in deep space. It would reach the small fighter squadrons operating from asteroid bases. It would reach the scattered survivors trying to protect what remained of human civilization. And something impossible began to happen. The dead star system had been dead for millions of years. Its sun was a black hole, invisible except for the way it bent light and pulled everything toward it. Nothing lived here. Nothing could live here. The radiation was deadly. The gravitational forces could crush a ship. It was the perfect place to hide. For the last 4 months, human ships had been arriving one by one. They came from different regions of space, taking different routes, moving slowly so their engines would not create detectable signals. They arrived damaged and limping, some with hull breaches sealed with emergency patches, some with engines that barely worked, some with crews that had lost so much they were not sure they could fight anymore. But they arrived. Commander Victoria Martinez stood on the bridge of the horizon and watched the latest ship dock with the growing fleet. The new arrival was a destroyer called the Fury. Its captain was a woman named Harper. She had lost 4 of her 5 shield generators in combat. She had lost half her crew. But she was here, and her ship still had weapons. "That makes 37 ships," reported Communications Officer James Cole. His hands moved across the control panel, updating the fleet manifest. "We have 12 carriers, 19 cruisers, and 6 destroyers. Small ships only. The large battleships are all gone." Victoria did not allow herself to feel the sadness that wanted to come. The large battleships were all gone because they had been destroyed defending Earth. Good soldiers had died with those ships. Entire command structures had been lost. The fact that 37 ships had made it here at all was a miracle that required accepting the deaths of thousands. "What about fuel status?" Victoria asked. "That is the problem," James replied. He pulled up another screen. Numbers and graphs appeared. "Most ships have enough fuel to reach the battle zone, but they will not have enough to return. Some will barely have enough to reach the zone at all." Victoria understood what that meant. This was not an army planning to retreat. This was an army planning to fight and either win or die trying. There would be no going home. There would be no backup plan. There would only be this: 37 ships, their remaining crews, and one final chance to prove that humanity was not finished. Admiral Philip Hayes arrived at the command center 2 hours later. His face was weathered like old stone. He had been commanding human fleets since before the war started. He had seen every strategy fail. He had watched empires of human military strength get reduced to ashes, but he was still fighting. "Captain Cross sent the final coordinates," Philip said. "5 days from this location, that is when we accelerate toward the main battle zone. That is when the forces will either detect us or miss us entirely." Victoria looked at the map. 5 days of travel through space with 37 ships held together by hope and determination. 37 ships that looked old and broken to any observer who knew how to read a military scan. 37 ships that the military would not believe could pose any threat. "Captain Cross is in the Asgard," Victoria said. "He will be the main command vessel for the operation." "No," Philip said. "I will be the main command vessel. I am the ranking admiral. Cross will coordinate with me, but I will make the final decisions." Victoria almost argued. She wanted to argue. She knew Aaron Cross better than she knew Philip Hayes. But she also knew that this was not about who was better. This was about military protocol and command structure. Even when everything was falling apart, humans held onto these things. It was one way they stayed human. The fleet started its final acceleration toward battle 5 days later, just as planned. 37 ships moving through space like ghosts, like the shadows of a fleet rather than the fleet itself. Their transponders were off. Their main engines were at minimum power. They looked to any distant scanner like debris floating through the void. Captain Daniel Foster commanded the destroyer Wolf. His ship was small and fast, built for getting in and getting out of combat quickly, except there would be no getting out. Daniel understood this. His entire crew of 92 people understood this. They had said goodbye to their families and recorded messages 3 weeks ago. They had written letters that would be sent home if they died. Everything was already finished. Everything was already accepted. "All systems holding," reported Engineering Chief Sarah Miller. "We are burning fuel at a steady rate. We will have combat capability for about 8 hours of fighting. After that, engines will start failing." 8 hours is enough, Daniel said. He did not know if this was true, but he said it anyway. His crew needed to believe that what they were doing mattered. They needed to believe that 8 hours of fighting was enough to change something. In the Asgard, Captain Aaron Cross received reports from all the ships in the forming fleet. The Fury was holding position. The Horizon was stable. The Wolf was ready for battle. Ship after ship reported ready. Ready for what was coming, ready to fight against forces they could not win against by any calculation of military logic. Aaron stood in front of his crew in the command center. He looked at their young faces. He looked at the determination in their eyes. He looked at the fear they were hiding because they needed to be brave for each other. "We are not outnumbered," Aaron said. "The collective thinks in terms of numbers. They think in terms of weapons and armor and technology. They think in terms of things that can be measured and calculated. But they do not think like humans think. They do not understand what it means to fight for something bigger than yourself. They do not understand sacrifice. They do not understand desperation that becomes strength." He paused. He made sure every person in the room could see his eyes, could see that he was not lying to them. The sensors detected the human fleet exactly when Admiral Philip Hayes knew they would be detected. Not before, not after. At the exact moment when the fleet had passed the point where hiding was no longer possible, the scanners on the command ship lit up with red warnings. "Contact," reported the sensor officer. His voice was calm. He had expected this for hours. "Multiple human vessels emerging from the stellar debris field. Current count is 37 ships. They are moving at full acceleration toward our position." Supreme Commander Hal looked at the display. For a moment, nothing moved. His crystalline face showed no emotion. Then he made a sound that was like shattering ice. 37 ships, he said. His voice was quiet, but it filled the command center. "Show me their condition." The sensor officer pulled up detailed scans of each human vessel. Damage was visible on almost every ship. Hull breaches patched with metal that did not match the original construction. Engines that were not firing at equal power. Shield generators that were only partially functional. Weapons systems that looked more repaired than new. "They are damaged," Hal said. It was not a question, he was stating a fact. "Yes, sir," the sensor officer said. "Our analysis indicates they are operating at 40% combat effectiveness. Our current fleet strength is 8 times greater. Mathematical models show human victory probability is less than 2%. Hal looked at the holographic display. He looked at the red lines representing human ships. He looked at the blue lines representing his armada. The blue lines outnumbered the red by a massive amount. The calculations were clear. The humans could not win. He had not expected them to attack anyway. In the human fleet, Captain Aaron Cross watched the same moment happen from the other direction. The scanners had found them. The hidden fleet was hidden no longer. There was no advantage left to keep. There was only forward. "All ships, this is command," Aaron said into the communication system. His voice was steady and clear. "Begin attack formation Delta. This is it. All vessels accelerate to full combat power now." The 37 human ships stopped trying to hide. Engines that had been running at minimum power suddenly burned bright. The fleet formed a shape like a spear, with the heaviest ships at the point and the lighter fast-attack vessels on the outside edges. It was not the formation that military textbooks said to use. It was the formation Aaron Cross had designed for this exact moment. The human fleet did not spread out to match the formation. They did not try to fight a defensive battle. They did not attempt to protect the weakest ships first. They attacked the supply lines. Commander Victoria Martinez personally led a squadron of 12 fast attack fighters directly toward the logistics fleet. These were not weapons ships. These were cargo vessels and repair ships and fuel tankers. They were the things that kept an army functioning. They were not protected by heavy weapons. "Contact the Horizon crew," Victoria ordered. "Tell them to target the fuel tankers, destroy them." The human ships moved like they were dancing through fire. They moved like they had accepted that many of them would not survive. And because they had accepted this, they moved with a kind of freedom that scared the commanders. Defensive fire cut into the human ships. A small destroyer called the Speed caught multiple direct hits. Its shields failed, its armor cracked, but the crew continued firing. The ship continued moving forward. It did not stop. It did not retreat. It continued until another volley of energy destroyed it completely. The crew of the Speed died as the ship died. 234 souls, gone in seconds. But in those seconds, they had destroyed 2 fuel tankers and damaged a repair ship. Admiral Philip Hayes watched the battle unfold from his position on the command display. He saw the human ships dying. He saw the red lines on the screen getting smaller and fewer. He also saw the formation starting to break. The alien fleet was not used to this kind of fighting. They were used to matching force against force. They were used to overwhelming enemies with numbers and firepower. They were not used to enemies that would sacrifice themselves to damage supply lines. They were not used to soldiers that would die to hurt the enemy's ability to continue fighting. All vessels maintain formation, Philip ordered. Do not try to rescue damaged ships. Do not break rank. Keep moving toward the communication ships. That is the key to this victory. 3 hours into the battle, the collective began to realize something was wrong. It was not that they were losing. By the numbers, they were winning. They were destroying human ships faster than human ships were destroying theirs. But something in the battle was not following the patterns that military calculations had predicted. The human ships were not fighting to survive. They were fighting to cause maximum damage before they died. And this was a type of fighting that was very, very effective. Captain Daniel Foster on the Wolf took his destroyer directly at a cruiser that was 3 times the size of his vessel. By all logic, this was suicide. The cruiser could destroy his ship with 1 volley of weapons fire. Full power to weapons, Daniel ordered. All engines to maximum, we are going straight at them. His crew did not hesitate. They had trained for this moment. They had thought about this moment. Now it was happening. The Wolf and the cruiser exchanged fire. The human ship was smaller and faster. It was also more maneuverable. The commander expected the human ship to break off the attack. It did not. Daniel Foster brought the Wolf in close. So close that the ship could not target him with main weapons. So close that only secondary weapons mattered, and the Wolf had more secondary weapons than the ship had expected. The cruiser's shields failed. Its armor was breached in multiple locations. The commander finally tried to move away to create distance for the main weapons to fire, but he was too slow. The Wolf rammed the cruiser directly into its main reactor. The explosion was visible across the entire battle zone. A light that was brighter than the sun expanded across the space between the 2 fleets. The Wolf died in that explosion, but it took the cruiser with it. 234 more human souls died. 1 massive ship, capable of destroying dozens of human vessels, died with them. It was a trade that any military calculator would say was bad for humans. More ships lost proportionally, more crew members dead. But it changed something in the battle. It changed the way the forces reacted. They were afraid. For the first time in this war, the forces were actually afraid of the humans. Supreme Commander Hal watched the destruction of his cruiser. He watched the Wolf come apart in the explosion. He watched the human crew die, and he finally understood something that no alien species in the collective had fully grasped. Humans did not calculate like they did. Humans did not think in terms of survival and optimal outcome. Humans thought in terms of sacrifice and victory, and sometimes they would choose sacrifice if it meant damage to the enemy. All forces regroup at Nexus Station, Hal commanded. His voice was still calm. But something had changed in him, something had broken in his certainty. The forces began to fall back. They were not retreating in panic. They were executing a tactical withdraw. The battle had lasted 12 hours, 12 hours of continuous combat, 12 hours of ships destroying other ships, 12 hours of families being destroyed in moments of fire and explosion. The human fleet that had started with 37 ships was now reduced to 23. 14 ships gone, 2,438 people dead. Most of them had families somewhere. Most of them had people waiting for them to come home. But they were not coming home. They were becoming numbers in a war that would not end for months. Commander Victoria Martinez stood on the bridge of the horizon and watched the forces continue their retreat. The alien ships were moving in disorganized patterns, falling back toward their main base at Nexus Station. They were moving like they did not fully understand what had happened to them. Victoria understood. The forces had been defeated by a fleet 1/3 their size. They had lost 3 major cruisers, 2 supply ships, 4 military transports, and numerous smaller vessels. By the mathematics of war, they should have destroyed the human fleet completely. They had not, and now they were afraid. "Damage report," Victoria said. Her voice was tired. She had not slept in 16 hours, but she could not sleep. People were still fighting. People were still dying. Horizon took 2 direct hits to the starboard side, reported Chief Engineer Lee. We lost some shield generators. Some cargo sections are flooded, but main systems are holding. We can continue combat operations for approximately 4 more hours at current power levels. Victoria nodded. 4 more hours meant they would reach the point where the engines started to fail. After that, the ship would be a floating target. But Victoria did not think about what came after. She thought only about the next 4 hours. Captain Aaron Cross sent a message from the Asgard. Continue pursuit. Do not let them regroup. Admiral Hayes says to push them toward their own forces at Nexus Station. Force them into a defensive position. It was a cruel order. It meant continuing to attack the fleet without allowing them to escape or consolidate their position. It meant keeping them dying instead of letting them rest. But Victoria understood the logic. A defeated enemy that was given time to organize became an organized enemy. An enemy forced to continue fighting while disorganized became an enemy that could be broken completely. She sent the order to the remaining human fleet. The ships accelerated toward the forces again. On the destroyer Valiant, Captain Harper watched her weapons officer fire at a military transport. The transport was running from the human fleet. It was not a weapons ship. It was a cargo vessel carrying supplies and equipment. But it was equipment, and in war, destroying supply lines was how you destroyed the enemy's ability to fight. The Valiant's weapons hit the transport square in its engine section. The transport lost acceleration immediately. It became a slow, moving target, but Harper did not fire again. She was out of ammunition for her main weapons. She had used all her reserves killing other ships. She sent a message to the next human destroyer in the formation. Continue targeting that transport. We have no more weapons. The other ship came in and finished destroying the transport. 1 more vessel gone. 1 more piece of their military machine broken. But the human ships were also breaking. The carrier Defender had lost half its hull. It was running on emergency power only. The crew had evacuated sections of the ship and sealed the breaches with bulkheads and emergency patches. The ship was holding together through force of will more than anything else. We are losing structural integrity, reported the engineering team to the Defender's captain. The main hull is cracking. We have maybe 6 hours before we start breaking apart. The captain, a woman named Cross, looked at her crew. They were tired. They were scared. Many of them knew they would probably not survive the next 6 hours, but they kept working. Continue full combat power, ordered. We die fighting or we die after surrender. Those are the only options. Across the human fleet, the same scenes played out on ship after ship. Crews that were dying pushed forward. Engines that were failing pushed harder. Weapons that were broken were repaired or abandoned for different weapons. Nothing mattered except continuing to push, continuing to fight, continuing to hurt the enemy. Admiral Philip Hayes received another message from a damaged cruiser. We are losing power to main engines. We can hold position and continue combat operations, but we cannot accelerate or maneuver. Understood, Philip replied. Hold position, support ships that are still mobile. You are now a mobile weapons platform. Fight until you cannot fight anymore. The captain of that cruiser accepted his death sentence with the same calm that all of them did. He would defend his position. He would fight the forces that came at him, and eventually he would be destroyed. But not before he damaged them, not before he made the enemy pay for killing him. In the command center at Nexus Station, Supreme Commander Hal watched the human fleet continue to advance. His forces were falling back. His ships were being destroyed. His carefully planned military strategy was collapsing around him. And he finally understood what was happening. The humans were not fighting to win anymore. They had already won the psychological victory. They had proven that the forces could be defeated. Now they were fighting to destroy as much of the military as possible before they themselves were destroyed. It was the fighting style of an enemy with nothing left to lose. And Hal realized that this was more dangerous than any military tactic. An enemy with nothing to lose would fight until the last soldier was dead. An enemy with nothing to lose could not be negotiated with. An enemy with nothing to lose had to be completely destroyed, which was not possible with the current forces. Send the retreat signal to all vessels, Hal ordered. Fall back to defensive perimeters around Nexus Station. We will consolidate our forces there. The armada that had been fighting the human fleet began to move in the opposite direction now. They were moving away from the human ships, moving toward their home base, moving toward a position where they would be stronger, more organized, more capable of defending themselves. But they were moving, and that meant the forces that had attacked Earth, that had blockaded the human, that had convinced themselves they had won the war, were now in retreat. Captain Aaron Cross watched the ships falling back. He saw the human fleet continuing to advance. He saw the destruction and the death and the victory all mixed together in the chaos of space. "All ships reduce pursuit," he ordered. "We have won the battle. The forces are retreating. All vessels consolidate position and begin damage assessment. Check on your neighbors. Rescue crews if you can. We have many dead to count today." The human fleet slowed. The pursuit stopped. The shooting stopped. The battle was over. It had lasted 12 hours. The human fleet had lost 14 ships. 2,438 crew members were dead. Thousands more were wounded. The ships that remained were so damaged that most of them barely held together. But the collective, the force that had seemed invincible, was in retreat. The military that had calculated a human defeat now faced a human victory. The aliens that had believed themselves superior had been proven wrong by an enemy that refused to surrender, refused to calculate correctly, refused to. The negotiations began 3 weeks after the battle ended. The human fleet was still damaged, still struggling to repair itself, still counting the cost of victory. But the forces were now willing to talk. The mathematics of the situation had changed. The certainty that had driven the collective for months was gone. Captain Aaron Cross sat across from Supreme Commander Hal in a neutral meeting station positioned between the two fleets. The commander looked smaller than he had in the holographic representations. His crystalline skin seemed less bright. His forearms moved slowly, like he was tired in ways that a being made of crystal should not be able to feel. "We could continue this war," Hal said. His voice was still calm, but it carried the weight of a broken certainty. "We have reinforcements coming from 3 other regions of space. Within 3 months, we could double our fleet strength. The mathematics would change again in our favor." "Yes," Aaron said, "and we would hurt you more, and you would hurt us more, and after all the death, we would still be here, and you would still be here, and the mathematics would not have changed anything except the number of dead." Hal was quiet for a long time. He looked at the human captain across the table. He tried to understand what kind of being would fight when the mathematics said they could not win. What kind of being would accept the death of thousands and call it victory? "What do you want?" Hal asked. "I want peace," Aaron said. "Not surrender, not victory that belongs to you. I want peace that belongs to both of us. The collective is strong. Humans are strong, but we are not the same kind of strong. You are strong because you have numbers and technology and organization. We are strong because we refuse to die, and we refuse to stop fighting when someone tells us we have already lost." "This is not something that can be negotiated away," Hal said. "One species does not simply change how it thinks about another species. The collective was convinced of human weakness. That belief drove our entire strategy." "Then tell them something different," Aaron said. "Tell them what you have learned. Tell them that humans are not weak. Tell them that we will fight until we are dead, and that this fighting is a type of strength that your calculations cannot measure. Tell them that the best choice is to accept humanity as a species that exists and will not be conquered. Not because we are stronger militarily, but because we are strong in ways that you cannot break with weapons." Over the following weeks, the negotiations became official. Other alien species joined the talks. The who had fought on the side sent representatives. The mechanical beings sent observers. Even species that had not directly participated in the war sent delegates to listen and to decide what they thought about humans now. Some of the aliens wanted to continue the conflict. They argued that the human victory was just luck, that the forces had been underestimating the enemy, that a new campaign with better preparation would end the war completely. But others had seen what humans did in battle. They had watched a fleet 1/3 the size of their own hurt them so badly that they had to retreat. They had seen crew members die and keep fighting. They had seen ships fall apart and keep firing weapons. They had seen something in human behavior that frightened them more than weapons ever could. By the end of the 4th week, the agreement was signed. Not a treaty of surrender on either side. Not a complete peace that made all conflict disappear, but an agreement that the war between humans and the collective would end. That blockades would be lifted. That Earth would be allowed to return to normal operations. that humanity would be recognized as an independent species with the right to control its own fate. Commander Victoria Martinez received a promotion to admiral. She was given command of a new colonial fleet, orders to rebuild the human presence across the galaxy. The ships she would command were some of the survivors of the Great Battle. The crews were made up of soldiers who had learned that they could defeat an enemy they were supposed to lose against. Admiral Philip Hayes was given responsibility for rebuilding the human military presence in occupied space. He worked with engineers and strategists to establish new defense stations. The aliens no longer saw him as an enemy to be destroyed. They saw him as a commander who had done something remarkable, and they wanted to understand how he had done it. Captain Aaron Cross was given a choice. He could retire. He could go home to Earth and live out the rest of his life as a symbol of humanity's victory. Or he could continue to work as a representative between humans and the alien species that now recognized humanity as something powerful. He chose to continue. He traveled between the worlds that had been in conflict. He sat in meetings and helped other species understand what humans were. He explained that humanity was not like the collective or any other species. Humanity was something unique, something that could not be calculated, something that could not be defeated because defeat was something that humans simply did not accept. On Earth, life began to return to normal. The blockade was lifted. Ships landed carrying supplies. The underground bunkers where families had hidden began to open. Children who had been born into a war they did not start came out into the sunlight and saw the sky for the first time without fear of alien weapons. But the war had changed things. Humans had learned that they could fight something that was bigger than them. Humans had learned that sacrifice could be a weapon. Humans had learned that an enemy that would not give up could force even superior forces to back down. In a meeting on Nexus Prime, 3 weeks after the official agreement was signed, Supreme Commander Hal stood with Captain Aaron Cross and looked out at the galaxy through a massive window. "I have studied your species," Hal said. "I have reviewed all the data from the battle. I have tried to understand what we miscalculated, and I have come to a conclusion." "What conclusion?" Aaron asked. "We measured strength in the wrong way," Hal said. "We measured it in numbers and firepower and technological advancement, but you were strong in a way we did not have a measuring tool for. You were strong in your refusal to accept defeat. You were strong in your willingness to die for something bigger than yourself. This kind of strength cannot be conquered with weapons. It can only be understood and respected." Aaron looked at the alien commander. He saw something in the crystalline face that he had not seen before. Understanding. Not agreement necessarily, but understanding. "We learned something too," Aaron said. "We learned that strength comes in many forms. We could not have won this battle without the military help from our allies. We could not have done what we did without understanding tactics and strategy. The aliens we fought against were not evil. They were just different. We fought them because we had no choice. But now that we have the choice, we can decide to live together instead." The two beings, one human and one, stood together and looked out at the stars. Below them, across the galaxy, the age of conflict was ending. A new age was beginning, an age where humans had proven themselves worthy of sitting at a table with the galactic powers. An age where a species from a small blue planet had shown all other species that strength took many forms. The from Earth had not conquered the galaxy, but they had changed it. And in a universe where 1,000 alien species had been certain humans were finished, certain humans were defeated, certain humans had no power at all, that change mattered more than anything else. The war was over. The future was uncertain. But for the first time since the conflict began, that uncertain future belonged to humans too. It belonged to every family that had survived the war. It belonged to every crew member who had died in battle. It belonged to the entire species that had refused to give up when everyone, including other humans, had thought they were finished. Aaron Cross closed his eyes. Behind his eyelids, he could see all the faces of the crew members who had died. 2,438 souls who would never see Earth again, who would never see their families again, who would become numbers in a history that future generations would read about in schools. They had made this possible. Their sacrifice had changed the galaxy. Their refusal to surrender had shown that humanity was something that could not be beaten, even when all mathematics said it could. And that was the real victory, not the military defeat of an alien armada, but the permanent change in how an entire galaxy understood what humans were. Do anything except fight with absolute commitment to destroying them. Admiral Philip Hayes sent a message to all the surviving ships. You have done something impossible today. You have beaten an enemy that was supposed to be unbeatable. We will rest. We will heal. And then we will decide what comes next. But today we have proven that humanity is not finished. In the silence that followed, the human fleet stopped moving. Around them, the wreckage of 14 ships floated in space, carrying the bodies of the fallen. The cost of victory was written in destruction and death, but the victory was real. But they were withdrawing. The human fleet, torn and battered and barely functional, was pushing back an armada that outnumbered them 8-1. The battle was not over yet, but the moment had turned. Humanity had shown itself capable of the impossible, and in that moment the collective learned that the war they thought they had won was not over at all. In 5 days, we are going to sail into the largest battle fleet the collective has assembled. We are going to be outnumbered 8-1. We are probably going to lose many of our ships. We are probably going to lose friends and crew members. But we are going to hurt them in ways they cannot predict. We are going to make them understand that humanity cannot be defeated through numbers alone. The crew did not cheer. They were too tired to cheer. But they straightened their backs. They put their hands on the controls in front of them. They prepared themselves for what was coming. The fleet continued its approach. Day by day, hour by hour, they moved closer to the battle zone. The invisible ghost fleet, the remnants of human military strength, the last chance the species had to prove it was not finished. In 5 more days, everything would change. In 5 more days, the collective would learn what it meant to fight against a species that refused to surrender. One by one, ships began to move. A destroyer hiding near a frozen moon changed its course. 3 cruisers, damaged and low on fuel, began accelerating toward the hidden coordinates. A carrier group scattered across an entire sector started the long journey home. Human soldiers, human pilots, human commanders who had thought they were alone and lost began to gather. Captain Aaron Cross watched the first reports come in, ships arriving at the gathering point, commanders reporting their status. Crews excited and terrified and hopeful all at once. The fleet was assembling. It was small. It was damaged. It was outnumbered by impossible numbers. It was the last hope humanity had. In orbit around Earth, the blockade fleet of the collective continued its patient work. They did not know that something was moving in the depths of space. They did not know that humanity had refused to surrender. They did not know that scattered soldiers and sailors and pilots were coming together for one final, desperate battle. They knew only that they had won, and they were preparing to claim their victory.